haben dem a shliach from Rebbe in Florida. I forget the town. My father was there. City of. Where are you from? Fort Myers. A Yiddish name, Fort Myers, Florida is so Jewish. Anyway, Fort Myers, Florida, Rabbi Yitzchok Minkowicz, was mir zette Masach, und das Meifitz Teure, und dann vor den Tasach Siddische Mamorim, ist Hakobet mit dem Betten, der Rabbi Yitzchok Minkowicz, soll uns Mahana sein mit ein paar Wörter.
L'chaim. L'chaim, Chashve Rabbonim, Shluchim, Anash. On Shabbos Gimmul Tamuz Tavshin Mem Ches. The Rebbe spoke right here from the Bima. It's a Mugadik Sikha. And the Rebbe opens up the Sikha by saying that Gimmul Tamuz is the Aschalas Haga'ula of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Rebbe goes on to say, if it's the Aschalas Haga'ula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, even though the Poil, the ultimate Geula, took place in Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, so the Rebbe says, it's a chiddush from the Rebbe, that you must say that Gimel Tammuz is greater than Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. And the Rebbe explains it with an introduction. Based on what it says in the Parsha, this week's Parsha, Parshas Koirach, so the Rebbe says there's a simple shaila that anyone, even a Ben Chomesh L'Mikra, should ask, that why is it and how is it that a Parsha Shabbat should be called after Koirach, a Yid that was a Choyte, someone that was a sinner and never did tshuva? Like, how could you call a Torah portion after Koirach? And the Rebbe says, are you going to say Balak? But the Rebbe says, it's powerful Lashonis, that a Yid that sins and doesn't do tshuva in a certain way is worse than Balak. So the shaila is, how is it that the Torah portion is called Koirach? So the Rebbe explains, and he says as follows. Yes, it's true, Koirach was a sinner and he didn't do tshuva. But what was Koirach's mission in life? What was his goal? What did Koirach want? So the Rebbe says Koirach he wanted to be a Kohen Gadol. So when you look at the fact that a Yid wants to be the Kohen Gadol, that's a beautiful thing. Not only that, the Rebbe says, we find the same idea, the Alter Rebbe explains in Lekutei Torah, that Koirach was a Levi. And Koirach knew that when Mashiach comes, the Leviim are going to be Kohanim. So Koirach was trying to fast forward. He wanted to bring in already the days of Gula, the days of Mashiach. Let's start already now. Let's now already the Leviim be Kohanim. So in other words, you see that Koirach was somebody that what was his goal? What was his agenda? He wanted one thing. He wanted to be the Kohen Gadol. He wanted to bring in the Gula. So because he had such high goals and aspirations, so even though B'chitzonius, he was a Koirach and a sinner and he didn't do tshuva, but because his motive was so great, that's why the Torah portion is called Koirach. After what? After we focus on the fact that he wanted to be the Kohen Gadol and the fact that he wanted to bring in the Mashiach times where the Leviim are going to be Kohanim. And the Rebbe says, you look into the Parsha, Rashi, what does Rashi say? That this Parsha is Yofa Nedreshes. What's that Yofa Nedreshes? Meaning to say is, no, we don't look at it as Koirach as a terrible guy, as a sinner. No, Yofa Nedreshes. It's a beautiful drash that you have somebody irrelevant to what his matzav is, his goals and aspirations of life are holy and amazing. And based on this, Rebbe says a fascinating idea, and he says as follows. And Rebbe uses the words, it's the Rebbe's Lashonos, a hira nifla, a tremendous lesson that you learn from here, that he says as follows. What happens when you meet a Jew, and b'chitzoynius, the Yid looks like koyrach, he looks like a sinner, someone that the Rebbe uses the Lashonos l'shel tachtia. So you can look at him, look at the way he's b'chitzoynius, but the Rebbe says no. The Jew tells you yafa nidrashes, which means Deirish, do a drisha kira. Look at who I am. Look at mipnimius who I am. I have an neshama. I am a yafa. I'm a beautiful person. The Jew is telling you, don't look at me, what I look like with my begadim, my chitzaynias, my levushim, my diburim, my maisim. Look at me. Look deep down within me. You will find that I'm a beautiful yid. And like the Rebbe says, we all know that everyone is a bnei Yisrael. And as we know, it says in the Gemara, afal pisha chata Yisrael who. That means even though somebody sins, what are we? Still Yisrael. And therefore, because we're still Yisrael, you have to look at somebody in a beautiful way. And the Rebbe takes this idea, where in other words, you have to look, not the b'chitzoynis, you have to look at the internal part of every Yid, and he takes this and he uses to explain why Gimmul Tamuz is higher than Yud Beis Yud Gimmul Tamuz, and he explains as follows. What happened, Gimmul Tamuz, Rebbe says, the Frierdiker Rebbe, unfortunately, when he went into prison, he was going to be, there was oynish movis. He was going to be put to death. What happened, Gimmul Tamuz? Gimmul Tamuz, they came along and they said, you're not going to be in prison, you're going into Gullus. So b'chitzoynius, where was the previous Rebbe going? He was going into Gullus. And the Rebbe brings from the chinuch that says that Gullus on a certain level is like Misa. So he was going from one Einish Misa technically to another Einish Misa. And as we know, the Frierdiker Rebbe went ahead and he said Ma'amar Chassidus, and he had a tefillah LaKadosh Baruch Hu. He prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything should go well. Why? Because it needed a tefillah. What happened after Yud Beis Yud Gimmul Tamuz? We realized, like the Rebbe says, we realized what we saw of a Gimmul Tamuz where the Rebbe was going into Gullus, and unfortunately it was dangerous. But what happened afterwards? We realized that Gimmul Tamuz wasn't chas v'shalom anything negative. The Rebbe says it was actually the beginning of the Geula. The Rebbe uses the word the schalt of the Geula, which is a very, very harsh term to use. It's schalt of the Geula for the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe is saying is Gimmul Tamuz, the goyim l'filzer freya. What's Gimmul Tamuz? If you look b'chitzaynias, it was a terrible thing, but b'pnimius, after the fact, what do you realize? Gimmul Tamuz is a schalt of the Geula. However, when it comes to Yud Beis Gimmul Tamuz, ultimately you have the ultimate freedom. So the Rebbe says like this: when it comes to Yud Beis Gimmul Tamuz, so the Frierdiker Rebbe was in prison, so it was a Yerida. Understand, the Yerida tzarich aliyah. Why? Because after he went out from Gullus, what happened? Okay, there was more chassidus. He was able to make Mayonis and so on and so forth. So Yud Beis Yud Gimmul Tamuz is what? Is only Yerida tzarich aliyah. However, Gimmul Tamuz is a schalt of the Geula. So as you're able to look behind the veneer, what do you see? What we see, Bagashmi, is the Rebbe was going into Gullus. But what do you see, Lepoil? You see a schalt of the Geula. And the Rebbe connects this idea. We know that we're in Chodesh Tammuz. Chodesh Tammuz, we know, if you look on the calendar before Yud Beis Tammuz and Gimmul Tamuz, there's no Yom Tovim there. You only have the Shivas B'Tammuz. But because now we're getting ready, we're right before Mashiach's coming, so we have to have a taste what it's going to be like Mashiach comes. So therefore, that's what we have. Yud Beis Gimmul Tamuz, Chodesh Agula. Tammuz is transformed into a Gula Dika Chodesh. You have Gimmul Tamuz, where you have the Schalt of the Gula. And the Rebbe finishes off something very powerful, and he says like this, that since we're talking about Geula, by talking about Geula, that's going to bring us to the ultimate, the Geula Hamitis V'Hashlema. So you see what the Rebbe is teaching us, two very powerful lessons. One is that we have to look into the pnimius of every single person and to find the good in everybody. Like the Rebbe says in the drashas, there's a drisha from the Yid that tells you, Yafa, find the beauty in me. And the second thing is we have to realize, even though we're living in a chayshah galus and chupal, but ultimately the fact is, in the galus, if you're able to see, when it's galus milsla frey, we'll see that really it's all about geula, and it's all about great brachas from the Eibishter. So I want to wish all of us on Gimmul Tamuz, we should all have the power to learn from the Rebbe, to look at every single yid in a positive way, to look at every situation, good, bad, or indifferent, as a great geula. We don't see it. No one saw it Gimmul Tamuz when it happened originally, but later on we learned that it's Chalta the Geula. We have the power to see tremendous geula for each and every one of us. L'chaim, l'chaim.